Welcome to Arts for the Health of It, a podcast where you will discover creative ways to improve your health and well-being. Someone may have told you that art isn't for you, but they were wrong. Anyone can create arts for the health of it. No talent or experience necessary.
I'm just a little songbird, try to fly my way homeward with the melody, and I make the beat. Don't know where it'll take me, cause when I'm in the dark of night, I sing my way back to the light. Come along with me and your heart will see that a song changes everything. Oh,
Hello, friends. Welcome to Arts for the Health of It, presented by Hearts Need Art. I am your host, Richard Wilmore.
And I'm your co-host, Constanza Roeder. In this episode, the title is Coping with Cancer Under 40 with Rob Shaver. And I'm so excited for you guys to meet Rob Shaver. I've known this guy for years, and he's a fellow AYA cancer survivor. AYA refers to Adolescent and Young Adult cancer, so people diagnosed in their teens through late 30s. And Rob is a three-time cancer survivor, and he's one of my favorite people in the world. He's so inspiring. Every time I talk to him, as long as I've known him, every time I talk with him I learn something new. His depth of wisdom and compassion and love for life and for people is just infectious. And he talks a lot about how important the arts and creativity have been in his in building resilience, in coping with cancer. And we work with this population a lot, right, Richard? We work with a lot of AYAs.
Yeah, wasn't he one of the first musicians in residence that worked with you in the hospital, correct?
Yeah, so even before Hearts Need Art existed, Rob and I would go and do little concerts on the oncology unit, and they were the most magical, wonderful things. He's also one of my favorite people to sing with. I'm so excited for you guys to listen to this.
I mean, he's amazing. Yes, I'll give you that. But also, you need to jump over to the YouTube channel of the Arts for the Health of It podcast to see the art form that is Rob's beard.
His beard.
Mine is intimidated by his, and it shrinks when his is around because his beard is, it's what all beards aspire to be.
Yes. You may hear his beard because it is so long. There wasn't a way to position his mic so that it wouldn't rub on his beard. So you may
get as third co-host.
Listen.
Yes.
So this is... Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, let me give you a little bit about Rob. He's a 16-year, three-time cancer survivor. His stage 4 was actually his initial diagnosis. He has a deep love for the outdoors and music, and he believes the role they have played in his treatment all of these years cannot be overstated. And
he's also a pharmacist. He was also one of his diagnoses was while he was in pharmacy school, and he talks about how that was. And so anyway, he just has such a unique perspective. We can't wait for you to hear this.
Yeah, because it's like knowing, as a patient, if you're just average Joe, you don't know necessarily all the words and what the medications, and he had
knew
the inside
all of it,
which had good and bad things. So anyway, Here's Rob Shaver. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Arts for the Health of It, the podcast. I'm your host, Richard Wilmore. I'm here today with two amazing people. Rob Shaver, who is a three-time cancer survivor. He's a dancer. He's a singer. He's an actor. He's all kinds of things. Before we really get into the conversation tonight with the two of you, I want to start with a vocal exercise. I think it's super important. No matter if you're a patient getting ready for a procedure, if you're a family member going into someone's room, how you enter a room and the energy you bring is so important into any situation. And I know, Stanzi, you have a really good vocal exercise for that. And I kind of want to start that today. So we're all, there's a lot of energy going into things like this, and I want to kind of help everybody. So, and no matter where you're listening or watching from, however you found us, however you're listening and why you're listening, I just want to give us all a moment to kind of pause, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and so we can all kind of start in a nice little fashion.
Great. Yeah, it's as a singer and performer, I was able to bring some of the things I learned from that world into my work in hospitals. And one of the things that's so important is to regulate your central nervous system. So when you're nervous, when you have heightened arousal, your sympathetic nervous system is keyed up. And when that happens, your higher order thinking shuts down. Actually, your voice doesn't. It can affect what your voice does. It obviously affects the energy that you bring into a space. So being able to regulate the nervous system and balance out that heightened arousal by calming things down is really key. So breath is super important for singing, for regulating as well. So we'll just take a couple breaths together. We're going to breathe in through the nose for the count of 4 and breathe out through the mouth for the count of 12. So we're going to lengthen that exhale, and that helps to turn on to activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So we'll just do a couple breaths like that. In through your nose, out through your mouth. In through your nose. And out through your mouth. Feel free to just soften your gaze or close your eyes, whatever feels good. One more time.
Driving, please don't do that.
Please don't close your eyes. Please. Breathe in. And out. Now let your breath just return to normal. And what we're going to do is we're going to just do a little sigh or a hum. The vagus nerve runs actually through the vocal folds, and the vagus nerve, when you stimulate the vagus nerve, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system. So just by creating sound, you actually are helping to regulate and calm yourself down. So we're going to take in a breath through the nose, and on our exhale this time, you're just going to do and this is not about sounding good. Like, it's just a hum. Anyone can do this.
Apologies to Ivan, who has to listen to this and edit this, all of this commotion that's about to happen.
Okay, breathe in through your nose. Richard, are you humming?
I am humming.
Okay,
this
good.
is what happens when your boss is in the room. I'm doing the work. I promise. I'm doing the work.
Are you humming with vibrato?
Yeah, right. Another thing you can do, if that even humming feels intimidating or inaccessible, you can actually gargle water. So you can take just a little bit of water.
I have water here. You're welcome, Ivan.
Oh, and it just kind of settles you down. Some of these exercises I learned from a music therapist, and I will link. I can't remember her name off the top of my head right now, but I'll put a link to an article that she wrote about some more vocal exercises like this. I'll put it in the show notes.
Cool.
So you can go and look that up.
Thank you for starting it off like that. I appreciate it. So you are both cancer survivors. At what age were you both diagnosed?
I was 20. Let's get it right. 28. 27 and 28 during that period of time. I probably had cancer a couple of years before that, but by the time I was diagnosed, I was 27. And
I was 13 when I was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia.
And I think what's interesting, a lot of things interesting, but one of the interesting things is you're both sort of lumped in what's called the AYA age group, and you obviously did a very different. You were diagnosed at very different times. Do either of you want to talk about like what AYA means and maybe the age range of that? A lot of people think young adult is like a 24-year-old, but that space of adolescent, young adult cancer patients is a really wide range.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing it's kind of twofold with regards to kind of how that's looked at, and obviously the age range Constanza can talk about, Stanzi can talk about, up to the age of 40 and whatnot. Nonetheless, I was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma, which is an adolescent bone cancer. The average age for that diagnosis is 15. Now, there is a small demographic, a small group that are diagnosed in their 20s. And without me going into great detail, I probably had it in my late teens. There's still some conjecture and some understanding of how it manifests in certain people. Nonetheless, the average age is 15. So I was given, even as a 27-year-old, the option of maybe being in a children's hospital because of the protocol and how they monitor the protocol, and several things gave me the option. Now, I was old enough that I decided to be the young person in the adult wing, and I was like the youngest person in the adult wing as a 27-year-old, but it was an adolescent cancer at least, because Stanzi can speak more, and I know as well the age range that we're talking about with young adult.
Sure. Yeah. So in the United States, AYAs, adolescent young adults in the cancer world, are 15 to 39-year-olds.
Right.
The UK goes down to 13. So I feel like I qualify. At least
you're in there.
But there's very unique challenges that this demographic faces. And Rob pointed out one of them. Like he was an adult, but he had an adolescent cancer. He very well could have been in a children's hospital. Yep. And as a children's hospital, most children's hospitals aren't equipped with supportive services for teens and young adults. A lot, even when I was in the hospital, even though I was a young teen, most of the supportive services that were available were geared toward young elementary school age children. And even if you were, and so you were the young one in the the older adult hospital. So similar issue there. You don't have anyone else that looks like you or that you can connect with on a peer level. And that's a really isolating experience. The other issue with this demographic is cancers tend to behave differently in this age group than in young pediatric and older adults. And there isn't enough research done on this age group to develop specific protocols for this age group. So because of that, the prognosis of the mortality in this age group hasn't made the same increase in survivability rates as other demographics. So there's a movement in the cancer community now to push for doing research on this age group and also providing targeted support. So you're starting to see like Teen Cancer for America is one of the organizations that is really pushing and partnering with hospitals to create AYA units. So instead of having a pediatric unit and an adult unit, you also have this AYA unit to provide services to support these young adults. Because these are people who have young families, who are in the identity formation times of their lives. They go from being totally independent to totally dependent. And it's a huge, huge blow.
Yeah, and not to interject, I apologize, but just to build on what you had to say, the unique variables in the life of somebody of that age is really quite interesting. You might be off of your parents' insurance for the first time, or be in the really a formulative period of so many different parts of your life, that it really is a unique variable set that you're having to deal with that's peculiar to that demographic, not even small demographic, but that large age range. Yeah, I mean, I've gone through it for 17 years, all of my 20s into the 40s, and I still consider myself AYA in many ways.
You are, Rob. You're still.
I think so.
Absolutely. Well, and
Yeah.
you even face issues with, AYA cancers aren't super common. So there's still a significant number of them. It's not that it doesn't happen, but because of that, doctors aren't always doing the testing needed to identify cancer in earlier stages. So a lot of times AYAs that we work with in the hospital were diagnosed in an emergency room after spending weeks and months in and out of doctors trying to figure out what's going on with them and trying to insist that something is wrong with them. And not until it becomes a life-threatening health issue do they finally get the testing they need to finally be diagnosed and receive treatment.
Yeah, I was just an anecdotal, case study of one here. I was diagnosed at stage 4. We call those unicorns to some degree, or zebras some degree with regards to those circumstances. And oftentimes in this demographic, you see more zebras, things that are more difficult to kind of find. No doubt about it.
Why do you think it's been such a neglected age range? I mean, it's such you're still forming who you are, and it's such a precious time of your life. I mean, they're starting to, obviously, like you were saying, talk about it and study it, but what took so long?
It's a great question.
My personal opinion with regards to that, and I just knowing that the peers that I have, or the people that I've met over the many years now, there just aren't that many cases. So if we look at it statistically, there are, but when you see young people or children with cancer, we all see St. Jude's commercials quite often. And I was raised an hour from Memphis, so it's something that I saw fairly often. And then we kind of know, especially as we know, like epidemiology and with regards to cancer diagnosis, the older you get, the chances of having cancer just exponentially increase. There is a time period where the actual number of people that get diagnosed is not as great. So it was in my state where I was originally from in Arkansas. With Ewing sarcoma, there were probably only 5 or 6 other people in the entire state that had like the cancer I have. It's something that like literally, in my case, affects like 1 out of every million children. It's not an environmental factor. It's genetic, and not even hereditary, but genetic. So in my case, and in some of those, it's on the rarity of how often they are diagnosed. Now, there are certain cancers that do that differently. But for me, at least, it's just something that you don't see much of. It's just not something that a lot of people know. I mean, not a lot of people know a 27-year-old, a pharmacy student who gets diagnosed with cancer at stage 4. It's just not something they see that often.
In the past, AYAs were lumped either into pediatric or adult.
Right.
And there were some landmark studies that were done that showed, again, the survivability rates across different age demographics. And they saw this huge hole in the middle where there was just this dip where prognosis rates weren't improving. And they're like, hey, this is actually, we really need to address this. And there were some real pioneers in the AYA movement that pushed for more favorable, even legislation. I mean, even until a few years ago, if you received a cancer diagnosis, you still had to keep paying your
student loans.
Like there was nothing, and it just was this easy. Like once it was brought to attention, like legislators were like, "Oh yeah, that's really stupid. We need to change that." So a lot of it is just awareness. Like it's just there's this growing awareness of this issue.
Yeah, they just don't know it's out there, and then they gets lost. Once you like talk about it and talk about student loans or talk about all of those things, it makes sense to people. Like, oh, obviously that would be a really good, difficult thing to go through at that point in your life. Wow, I haven't thought about that. I haven't thought about that group, that kind of left out little demographic there. Yeah.
Rob, what's the art scene like in Arkansas?
It's what would I say? It's interesting. As far as like, it depends on, I guess, the genre, the niche you're wanting to get into. There's some really great country music and bluegrass music and folk music. If you like Evanescence, Amy Lee, is from Arkansas. So there's things like that are kind of interesting. And there's little pockets of different types of music. I had an eclectic, but Constanza knows very well. I was raised an hour from Memphis, so I was definitely Memphis influenced in a lot of ways as well. But Arkansas is eclectic. Let's say that.
So Stanzi has of course an amazing story, and if you go back to our pilot, you'll hear and learn more about her. So I don't want to do that your whole story again.
Not necessary.
No, but talk a little bit about where you grew up in California and the access that you had, and then I want to know, like, Rob, where were you when you were first diagnosed? Were you in Texas? Like, kind of the difference in how you were both cared for.
So I was treated at Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, which I'm so excited to say that now has an AYA program. They didn't 20 years ago when I was diagnosed, but that's okay. They got there eventually. But even still, being in a pediatric hospital, there was a lot more supportive services, just period. There was lots of social workers. There were arts activities that we could do in the waiting room. There were support groups. There were all these different things that were super valuable. And I just thought that's how we cared for people with cancer. And that makes sense. We got to take care of the whole person, right? And it wasn't until I stepped onto an adult oncology unit that I was like, oh, it's not like that over here.
For me, I had been sick for some time and very, very, very ill. Just being completely honest. I was dying, for sure. I was diagnosed stage 4 with mets and some really metastasis to some really dangerous places. I was a student, a pharmacy student in a doctorate of pharmacy program at the University of Arkansas, and I was actually diagnosed at the place that I was a student at the hospital that I was actually a student. I was rounded on by my friends, by people I knew that I went to school with. I was treated at that hospital and then went into remission, came back to finish school, and then diagnosed at that hospital again. So I've been a student 2 different times at the University of Arkansas and a cancer patient in the same hospital 2 different times as well, which created a really unique, remarkable, and in retrospect, and even in the time, a very raw, real, wonderful environment, but one really unique, for sure.
What do you both remember, like, the first thought or the first word that you thought of when you were diagnosed? Do you remember that moment?
I do, yeah.
For me, I had no words. And really, I just had this like scream in my throat that couldn't get out. How about you, Rob?
Yeah, I think I was probably in such a state physically, I think at the time, at least for me, and this is certainly not the case for everybody, but in my situation, I've been diagnosed 3 different times. And I think all 3 times I thought, yeah, that's probably right. I was in such a state, even last year, given the state that I was in when they came back, I'd prepared my family even that most likely, it was going to be what it was. So even then at the time, it was something that, at least the way I felt physically, now how advanced it was and what stage it was and all of that stuff, I didn't necessarily know that, but I was afraid it was going to be something serious. So me, I kind of, I thought, yeah, that's probably right.
And you were a doctor, so like you were a pharmacist going into
I was in school. I was in my second year the first time I got diagnosed. So, that's a double-edged sword. And in retrospect, I'm so glad I have the knowledge and I have that, even though I don't do that any longer, that I had that background. But yeah, I knew what all my chemotherapy drugs did. I knew all the side effects. I knew that adriamycin is called the red devil. I couldn't pretend that was just cherry cola, up in the bag. I knew all of those things. I'd rounded in those circumstances, so I knew what to expect for good and bad,
Were you both into the arts before your diagnosis?
Yeah. I grew up in a musical family, so singing and performing was always part of our norm as a family.
Yeah.
But visual arts and just other forms of art making, really not. I was really introduced to art making by a group that provided art therapy experiences for teens and adults with cancer. And that's where I really, that was a life-changing experience for me, because it gave me a safe place to express all the unspeakable things that I couldn't even articulate and didn't always feel safe to express to other people for fear of them freaking out that I was feeling those dark stuff, all that dark stuff. But the canvas didn't judge me. I could just pour everything in there. And then once it was externalized, I could then transform it and take control back and create something beautiful from it.
Yeah. And I had always been in the arts, kind of like Constanza, from the musical standpoint and like vocal performance and, playing music. I think the visual thing, which is, I don't know if I've ever even shared this with Stanzi before. There, at different points along my own cancer journey, there have been different parts of the arts that have resonated differently with me. One of the ones that's real interesting, and it's so interesting because it's how she and I met. The second time that I got diagnosed and went through chemo and radiation back in 2011 and 2012, that was when Les Miserables, the 25th anniversary, had just come out the previous year. And basically all I did is I went through treatment, was lay in my bed in the back of my room and listened to the 25th anniversary of Les Mis over and over again, thinking I would be a great Valjean, which is still,
of course,
still quite true. Still quite true. Yeah, right. Right. Nonetheless, I listen to it all the time for what it brought me with. We'll probably get into that at some point. All the different elements of the art that resonates deep with us, especially in real raw and difficult moments. And she and I ended up meeting by doing Les Mis together. The other thing visually that I thought was really interesting, I don't think we've ever I think you know this, but I took Bob Ross painting lessons. I literally drove 2 hours one way in Arkansas in the hills to take Bob Ross painting lessons from a guy who knew Bob. And I did that. Yeah, I have paintings at the house that are Bob Ross style wet on wet paintings that I literally, as I was rehabbing myself going through radiation the last time in 2012, that's what I did.
I never knew that, Rob. That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. I totally did.
That's that's so interesting, because I did want to talk about that, about being able to use different arts and finding like what works for you at that moment. I know, and I want to talk about how the two of you met doing theater. I know it's something that Stanzi loved, but then kind of went away from, and because it wasn't doing what it needed to do for you. So, you're an amazing singer, and I think that's really important. I think it's a really important thing to talk about, of finding what works for you and what resonates with you, and being okay with trying and maybe not being as great as you're hoping to be at something, or being great at it and being like, yeah, but that's not how I want to express myself.
Yeah, I think it's kind of one of those things where who was it that said it? Was it Dizzy Gillespie or Miles Davis? Like, what kind of music is there? There's just good music. And I think that's true with regards to, regardless of genre. I can go over to the Kerrville Folk Festival and sit there at the new artist thing and literally be moved to tears, no different than I can on the barricade, in Les Mis or something like that. I do feel like different pieces and different genres and different avenues resonate differently with different people and bring different aspects to it. I think she and I both would say, I love theater. I like doing that. I think it's a remarkable medium to be able to tell a story, and it's super, super moving. But so is sitting here in my house playing a house concert or a garden concert for 15 people. I think authenticity is something that kind of shines through, regardless of how it's the direct medium. Nonetheless, I think we all have different talents and abilities, and there are certain things that maybe we're better at, or maybe that we kind of take to more easily than others. But for me, it's just about making moving pieces of art that move people and resonate inside of me and with the people I'm communing with at the time, no matter what. I don't care if we're on stage at Six Flags, at a local theater, or, sitting with my guitar at the Pearl.
And we know that different arts engagement, different mediums bring out different things. We use different parts of ourselves when we interact with different mediums. And so sometimes I think certain parts of you need more of this other thing. So, and for me, I studied music in college. So there was this tendency to perfectionism and a lot of judgment around singing. I know, right? It's shocking. Around singing. And so sometimes singing was expressive and was an expressive release, but a lot of times it wasn't. It was more of a technical exercise and experimentation, which had its own benefits, but wasn't truly just like a raw expression sometimes that I needed. So sometimes going outside of my main art form, where I didn't have as much preconceived notions or as much judgment around, gave me that freedom. And so I actually started taking dance lessons after college. I was the oldest person in my ballet class, and I did not care. And I just found a lot of a freedom in physical expression in dance that was very different than what I found in voice. And then visual arts, there's a way that, man, it taps into your subconscious like nothing else. And so I love like visual journaling. Sometimes when I'm blocked, I like just need to get out my sketchbook, and it doesn't matter what it looks like, but I'm going to I need to get out whatever these images are that are in my subconscious that are keeping me blocked. And writing has always been a consistent thing for me. It's just the literary arts of really getting stream of consciousness, getting my thoughts out and externalizing them and helping to process my emotions and thoughts that way. So there's so many, I'm a fan of like all mediums, and I need them each for different things, I guess.
And there's a lot of gray there in between those mediums too. What's so interesting about that too, speaking about like, and you do a good job with poetry and writing and some of those things. And you know this by performing with me many, many times. To me, there's in vocalizing and singing, there's a stream of consciousness that comes with me with singing. There's sometimes that I don't really know what I'm going to do per se. And you have always done a good job of following me when I may do something totally different. It's something that is very raw and real and very present. So without getting into like, it's a huge one for me. It's an anchor to the present moment and the creative magic, the creative, if that's the right word, and without sounding too cliche, that art can bring us to in any given moment or every moment.
Was there a moment at all during any of your treatment or diagnosis that you stopped creating?
Ooh, that's a great question.
And, thank you. And what did that feel like? If you did, maybe you didn't.
While Rob thinks about that, there were definitely dry times in my life. And I don't even think just during treatment. I mean, I even think even this past year. So this past year when the pandemic hit and we couldn't go into the hospital more, and I wasn't singing every week in the hospital, and all of my voice students were online and we weren't singing together in person anymore, without even realizing it, I stopped singing. But there was someone asked me to sing for their like socially distanced wedding several weeks back, like several months ago. And I had to start practicing because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm realizing I haven't sung in a while and I'm really rusty. And so I had to start practicing again. And after my first like long practice session, I literally came like dancing and skipping out of my music video. And Jeff, my husband, Jeff, he's like, are you happier now? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you realize you stopped singing at the beginning of the pandemic, right? And I was like, I just didn't even realize that I had just totally let go of that. And I know all the science behind it that, singing and listening to music and engaging with music boosts endorphins and makes us feel better. Like I know all these things, but I just had stopped. I think there has been times like that where I've just forgotten and kind of come away from it. And then when I rediscover it, I'm like, yay, I missed you.
I think that happened to a ton of artists, especially at the beginning of the pandemic. Everyone was like, all right, this is going to be over in 3 months, and I'm going to come back with the best album of my life, or the best comedy special, or the best book, and I'm going to like be super creative. And then month 9, we were like, well, this is boring, and I don't want to do this anymore. And then we all kind of gave up a little because it was so stressful. And then it felt like everybody needs that hibernation time where you kind of go into yourself and you do that. And I think we had too much of that. And so then we were like, there's a lot of hibernation. And now how do I get out of that? And then it turns out, it's art. This is how you get out of it. Start it again.
I think for me, there have definitely been times just given the condition that I was in, I wasn't able to do it as well as I could at other times. I had stomatitis quite bad. So those are the ulcers that go all the way down your throat to your alimentary canal. And I actually had co-written a song. I know I've never shared this before. Co-written a song many years ago. This is back in 2005 that they were doing a session of at a really pretty nice studio. And I went when the song was being recorded, and I couldn't sing the part because I was sick. Because I was a bald guy standing there, trying to tell them what to do, and as they played the chord progression and all this stuff, and I couldn't sing the own stuff that I'd helped write. And they were super kind and thoughtful and compassionate given my circumstance. So there have been times where, like, physically I couldn't do it. Nonetheless, I will say this, and this is the way it's been more often than not. And I've been through chemo 4 different times, most recently just over the last 12 months. This last time, I was music, even no matter how I felt. I didn't do this for anybody else. I did share a few things on YouTube that some people saw, just some nice videos, I guess, and things. But I do it for myself, just to be present, to kind of tap into the magic that is expression in the present moment and feel empowered. I did that almost every day this last time if I could. Even if I felt really sick, I went up to the office where I'm sitting now and got out my guitar or whatever and just kind of did the best I could because I know I needed to. There were other times where I just listened to somebody else do it, like when I had the Les Mis thing. I just wanted to listen to Leia Salonga and Alfie Boe and everybody else like serenade me, and that was quite good, but I would prefer to be doing the singing. So there are times when I'm doing that as well. But yeah, there have been times physically where I couldn't do it or I just felt so sick, but I've always tried. I've just needed it for any number of reasons to help bring me the present moment magic that it can kind of give. And this last time I did it like wild. These recordings I make, I'll never share with other people other than my family, but a huge part of my own way of dealing with the circumstance for sure.
Yeah, Constanza, you touched on that a little bit with visual journaling. You guys, you are both performers, and so you're always out performing for other people to get a reaction from other people. How are you using the arts for yourself in your alone time? And I know as a performer, like part of performing for audiences is helpful for you, and it's that escape too. But what do you do for yourself?
So for me, that is a really big part of it. I hope to feel like that when I perform, at least if I'm doing justice to the way I want to perceive whatever it is I'm doing, I would do it the same for 2 people that I would for 2,000. And that's the way the art is for me, because there's so much of the stuff that I do personally that no one will ever hear. But it is a big part of just my expression of being alive and being present and being thankful. It just goes through that filter for me. Some artists have it with regards to obviously the visual arts or painting or writing or poems that will never be read. I feel like for me, it's always been my expression has been through like music. I do that just constantly. And I hopefully when I get to perform in front of other people, that resonates in how that performance is too, because what I'm doing for them, I'm doing for myself. The communion I'm having with them is the one that is my kind of conduit to the present moment that I think music and art in general can kind of provide. So when I'm doing that, I don't do it any different. Now, I may try some runs or I may try some kind of something different musically by myself than I would with other people, but the source, the humble, hopefully non-egoic, not needing the glory kind of source is just thankful to be able to be there with the music. Just thankful to be able to be there with the art. And I can fully say that, yeah, it's just such a big part of my own personal experience of being alive. I'm glad anytime I can share it with just myself or anybody else too.
And Rob does that better than any performer I've ever known. Like, he truly is like totally connected and totally himself when it's just the 2 of us jamming out or we're performing. Like it's just, I love it. I love watching. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah. Thank you. Mom.
I'm a big fan.
She's fangirling over you right now. I do want to talk about your connection, the 2 of you. You met, like we were talking about before, in theater. How you knew nothing of each other before this. And I want to talk about that connection that you both have made and where that friendship has brought the 2 of you.
We had this shared experience, and it kind of morphed into us kind of forming this duo band, and we just kind of loved singing together. And so we were able to perform at several cancer events. We even traveled to like New York and some other places with Survivor, CER. It's an organization. So shout out for Tamika and Survivor. They support women who've experienced cervical cancer, and we ended up recording like a Christmas EP.
Super fun. I mean, I hope we get to play more at different points.
I know.
For sure.
I know. I miss it.
It's been a while. It's been a while now. You know, it's been a good while. But hopefully that'll happen. But it was super cool. Yeah, so awesome. Yeah,
that was really fun.
Rob, as someone who you've had cancer 3 times now. My dad was first diagnosed with cancer in 1992 and has had it at least once a year ever since. And I asked him, is it something, and this is a question for Stanzi too, is it something that you think about every day, or is it something that sort of is it something that's just part of your life now? Like, how do you define it now without it taking over your life? You can't obviously allow that to happen.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to have to kind of think about it. And I can only say kind of how it works for me and kind of how I interact with others. For me, I know it's a part of my life. Now I've had it so many times and at the staging that it's been, that we now know that mostly, maybe like your dad, I don't know the exact circumstance, I have probably not been cancer-free very often in the last 17 years. With regards to micrometastasis and all of those things. And even now, as I sit here, I'm not cancer-free sitting here. So I know now that it's just kind of part of the way my life is and the way that my body is. Interestingly enough, though, and this is kind of a work in progress, I think, and we all kind of wake up every day with the opportunity, and Constanza knows I often use the phrase win the day, which is kind of my personal mantra. I kind of accept it the way it is, and I embrace it as a part of my experience and my journey, and it's not going to keep me from winning the day, regardless of that being part of my life, of that being a variable that I have to deal with. That's just another mountain that I'm going to have to deal with, and I'm okay with that. I embrace it as an opportunity to maybe relate to others better, to have greater compassion for the world at large and the different maladies and circumstances that people go through. This just happens to be my circumstance. I like the phrase, my strength is made perfect in weakness, and maybe my grit, my determination, or my compassion, or my love is made greater because I have to deal with cancer. So it's something that I understand, that I embrace, that I don't run away from, but I try to embrace as just part of my circumstance, and use it the best I can. Use it as well as I can to live as well as I can, one day at a time.
Well said.
Thanks.
I mean, for me, it's been so long since I've been off treatment. I haven't had chemo for 18 years. I've been off chemo for 18 years. And you would think like, oh, it's like way in the past. And and yes, it is in the past. But it also, cancer is this gift that keeps on giving. And especially with blood cancers, the treatment is rough. Like I had 130 weeks of chemo, and that changes your body a little bit. And even just being a survivor of trauma, like I'm a trauma survivor, and that affects how my amygdala formed at a very young age, and that affects my nervous system. So I'm very sensitive to stress, and my body will just shut down. Like I will go kind of like it'll shut down. It's not pretty. And so I'm very grateful for my husband, whom I'm very reliant on when I have these periods where I just shut down, and he knows it happens, and he takes care of things. He, takes care of me and picks up the slack. And, he knew that kind of going in when we met as a young couple, that there was an element of our marriage that he was going to be a caregiver. And it sucks when that comes up, because it's, it feels like you're a burden on your loved ones. But it also has made us have to stay so close as a couple too, have to communicate on a level that maybe other young couples don't. And he can usually tell when I'm headed for a shutdown before I can. And he tries to like head it off like, hey, you really should probably go to bed early tonight. Like, you had a very stressful day. Do I listen to him? No, I'm still working on that.
She doesn't listen to her work husband either.
I don't. I know. I'm sorry, Richard. It's just go, advance. And I think I'm very inspired by Rob's perspective. And, I think he's more mentally tough in this area than I am. And I draw a lot of inspiration and wisdom from his perspective.
Thank you. And I will say likewise, though, Constanza has been a great example of being able to go in difficult environments, not, to talk about what Hearts Need Art does. And I've been very transparent with her about the difficulties that I have in certain environments and how raw and how difficult it may be for me. To be able to go in some places and that's really quite difficult. So she's been a great example. Nonetheless, like Constanza said, in having like physical issues or other trauma issues and those things, we always talk about the new normal, and that's really become a big thing with COVID and what the new normal is. For those of us who've had very serious illness, or as a young person had cancer and all of those things, for me, as someone who's had it so many times, I feel like I'm having to recalibrate all the time. And what my new normal is. I mean, how bad? And obviously, I'm missing some bones, and I don't have full usage of some areas in my body, and my lungs don't work completely well. Every time you have this recalibration that takes place, this new normal to be like, okay, this is baseline, what it is now. What do I do with it now? How do I make the best of it? How do I keep the best perspective as I can without getting too caught up in the what if scenarios of future, or the what ifs that can incredibly, come to anybody who's dealing with something like this. How do I control what I can control right in front of me right now without getting so tied up and so scared about the uncertainties or the what ifs that naturally come when you're dealing with living with cancer. And the arts happen to be an anchor for me to be able to find that what I can control, what I can appreciate, what beauty I can find in the now, for sure.
What is the last artistic thing you both did?
I do it all the time.
I know. I played with my baby JJ on the piano earlier. I think for singers, it's hard to know like where it ends and begins.
What's working?
Rob is always singing. Like I think we're both always singing. Rob even more than I do.
Yeah, like when I was singing with Journey in the car an hour ago. You know what I mean? When I was singing harmony above Sting during his song a minute ago, maybe.
He's not exaggerating. He can do that.
constantly expressing yourself through that, for sure.
I think maybe that's a call out to Sting. If Sting wants to come on and have a battle with you on this program, we can set that up. I'm pretty sure he's listening. I swear. If you're listening to this, you need to go to heartsneedart.org and click on the podcast link to just look at Rob's beard. I cannot end this conversation without talking about that beard, Rob.
All right, so, and I think I showed you the picture earlier. My hair started coming back in this time July, and I just kind of said, okay, I'm just going to let it go again the way I've done it before, and this is what we have now. And it's really curly. It can really be about that long, so it goes up. So anyway.
This is so when I met him the first time, he was in the process of growing his hair out. I don't think you would cut it since you had lost it and it started growing back.
So my hair is only this long right now, and I haven't had a haircut in 15 years. I've lost my hair 4 times. So I think like 11 years or something. So I go bald and then I grow it again. I've cut the beard before it would be ZZ Top level, but so I haven't had a haircut in so many years. This is me growing it out since July. Yeah,
but you can do the beard, so that's what you're concentrating on.
Yeah, and I plan on, I'm going to go as long as I can with this too. We'll see where it goes. But this thing is, I don't know. My doctor, I do the virtual visits with my oncologist, and we're both mutually, impressed. It's pretty good right now.
It is very impressive.
Thanks, man. Look how gray.
I love that there's just like a big patch at the front.
Spurs. I'm a big Spurs fan. You know, I love the silver and black.
Los Spurs. Yes.
Right.
You did it on purpose, obviously.
Right.
Yeah. If people want to connect with both of you, how best can they do that?
Oh, for me, I do have an Instagram and a Facebook, all that stuff. Rob Shaver. On either of those is good. Instagram or Facebook, either one.
And you can find me at Constanza Roeder. You can find my website, constanzarader.com.
Super easy to spell.
R-O-E-D-E.
Right.
Constanza Roeder, super easy to spell. We will put that in the show notes. Please don't try to do that while you're driving because you will not be able to type that in.
No.
Any last words from either of you? I want to thank you so much for spending an hour with me. I really appreciate it.
Well, I just wanted to say to Rob was so inspirational for me and such an encourager to me to start Hearts Need Art in the beginning. Like he was right there with me, like, yes, this needs to be a thing in San Antonio. Yes, we need to bring more artists into the hospital. And he helped with the initial fundraising campaign. Like we did music together to like raise money. And so Rob, I mean, just thank you for all of that. Like we probably wouldn't be where we are without you. So
that makes me feel so good. And the thing that I really appreciate too is you've been able to do something that I haven't been able to do for any number of reasons. And I appreciate that so much and what you guys are able to do consistently and at a level that's really making a difference. It makes me feel so good to know that I had some small part to play in what you guys are being able to provide. And because of any number of circumstances, I'm not able to do it at the level you guys are. And I'm just so moved by what you do and everybody and how hard they work. I mean, just honestly, for me to be a small part of what you guys are doing makes me, oh my goodness, makes me so happy. At the same time, I hope we get to play more music together. I'll just tell you the truth. I mean, I hope we're kind of able to do that. And if anybody is out there listening, obviously you guys are able to do it every day. Just continue to make art, get outside, stay present, find that anchor to the magic that is the present moment, day at a time, through what way you need to do it. And the arts is a wonderful way to find that connection.
I think
for sure
our growth is directly correlated to the growth of your beard.
Whoa!
So
nice.
The longer your beard gets, the bigger we're going to get. So please don't ever shave it off or I might lose my job.
Yeah, Dumbledore style. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you both so much.
Will do. Thanks, brother. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
That's it. Thanks, everyone. We love you. Good night.
Thank you for listening to Arts for the Health of It, a podcast produced by Hearts Need Art, creative support for patients and caregivers, in partnership with the National Organization for Arts and Health. You can help others learn about the healing power of the arts by subscribing, sharing, and reviewing the podcast wherever you listen or watch. The podcast is hosted by Richard Wilmore, co-hosted by Constanza Roeder, and produced by Ivan Briones. Our theme song, Songbird, is written and performed by Natalie Lane. Visit heartsneedart.org to learn how you can support our mission to create joy with people facing life-altering health challenges. Join us next week to learn more ways you can create arts for the health of it. The views expressed on this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of Hearts Need Art, their staff, board members, or other affiliates. All content is created for informational purposes only. This podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice or to diagnose and treat any health condition. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health professional with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you heard on this podcast.